What happens when a prince loses the one thing left keeping him relevant? Not the palace, not the crown, not even the press, but a passion project. One carefully crafted, branded, and built to outshine the scandals and silence the critics. For Prince Harry, that project was the Invictus Games, a noble cause, a global platform, a lifeline. But now, even that seems to be slipping through his fingers. At first, it was subtle, a quiet absence here, a PR misstep there. But then came the headlines, resignations, financial concerns, rumors of disengagement, and worst of all, there is a growing sense, even among loyal supporters, that Harry might no longer be the driving force behind the movement he once claimed to live and breathe. If the goal was to rebuild his image through service, something went terribly wrong. Because instead of being seen as a leader, Harry is now being seen as replaceable. And it gets worse. Because this isn't just about the games, it's about everything Invictus was supposed to represent. Strength, resilience, and purpose. Strip that away, and what's left? A prince without a mission, a brand without a backbone, a couple clinging to relevance while the walls slowly close in. But how did it all start unraveling? And why are insiders now saying the 2027 Invictus Games might become the biggest royal embarrassment yet? Let's just say, this collapse wasn't sudden. It was brewing for years. And now, the cracks are no longer possible to hide. Because the games may go on, but will Harry still be invited to play? Stay with me, because what we uncover next exposes far more than just a bad PR cycle. It's the story of a prince who may have already lost the plot. And the next chapter? It's brutal. If Prince Harry was hoping to be remembered as a champion for veterans and wounded warriors, the numbers coming out of his charity work are telling a very different story. Let's talk about Centervale, or more specifically, the charitable organization closely linked to Harry that was supposed to symbolize his post-royal purpose. Once hailed as a modern royal's answer to service, this nonprofit was meant to back his Invictus ideals and showcase his commitment to causes beyond palace walls. But recently, the headlines have been brutal. 1 hour per week. That's what the public filings revealed. Just 1 hour a week reportedly spent on actual charitable work. 1 hour. And if that wasn't damning enough, the backlash didn't just come from tabloids or Twitter threads. It came from within. Dr. Sophie Chanduka, the chair of the very organization Harry was aligned with, traveled to London and took the gloves off during a televised appearance on Sky News. Her words didn't just sting, they shattered the illusion. She openly questioned Harry's role, his presence, and most painfully, his relevance to the mission. For a man who once stood shoulder to shoulder with injured veterans, this wasn't just criticism. It was a public divorce. The optics? Disastrous, especially for someone who built a post-royal identity on the very idea of service. Because in this new world where reputations are earned, not inherited, there's no palace spin machine to clean up a charity scandal. There's just cold, hard paperwork. And a chairwoman who's not afraid to speak her mind. Even more damaging is how this 1 hour revelation aligns with long whispered concerns behind the scenes. Rumors have swirled for months that Harry's passion for charity had taken a back seat to Hollywood deals, podcast production fantasies, and scripted authenticity projects. Suddenly, it all clicked. The passion project wasn't passion, it was PR. And for donors, veterans, and volunteers who believed in the mission, the betrayal cuts deep. Because if Harry can't show up consistently for a cause he personally championed, what does that say about everything else he claims to stand for? The cracks in his charity work are just the beginning. Because next, the world sees what happens when you mix Fashion Week energy with a veterans support event. And Meghan Markle takes center stage, whether the crowd wanted her or not. When Meghan Markle touched down at the Invictus Games, the cameras were ready, the flashbulbs popped, the headlines buzzed. But the story wasn't about wounded warriors or global unity. It was about Valentino, Givenchy, and Cartier. And just like that, an event built to honor veterans became a catwalk, one that left a bitter aftertaste in the mouths of those who actually cared about the mission. To be clear, the Invictus Games weren't meant to be glamorous. They were born from pain, perseverance, and pride, a raw and real space for injured servicemen and women to reclaim strength and solidarity. But Meghan's appearance at the 2023 Games in Dusseldorf shattered that tone entirely. Instead of showing up in solidarity, she showed up in style. In not just any style, high style. Think thousands of dollars in head-to-toe designer labels, immaculately styled hair, a stylist reportedly flown in from LA, and multiple outfit changes each day, like it was her personal runway. At first glance, you might chalk it up to celebrity. After all, isn't that what royals turned Hollywoodites do? But here's where the backlash exploded. The optics weren't just off, they were offensive. Veterans from around the world arrived in simple team uniforms, many still dealing with physical and emotional scars. Meanwhile, Meghan made headlines for wearing a nearly $5,000 outfit on day one alone. Social media didn't hold back. Critics called it tone deaf, tacky, and even predatory PR. The press smelled blood. Tabloids started counting outfit costs instead of medals. Fashion bloggers broke down her looks, while wounded soldiers received barely a passing mention. And inside Invictus circles, murmurs turned into murmurs of rage. Some insiders allegedly described her presence as a hijack, a takeover that shifted the focus from veterans to Vogue. But the fashion wasn't the only problem. It was the energy. Meghan didn't just attend. She dominated. She gave speeches. She posed in VIP boxes. She hosted photo ops with her arms draped around athletes like a political candidate mid-campaign. And while she did praise the participants, critics pointed out the praise often came wrapped in Meghan-isms, stories about her own family, her own struggles, her own brand. One particular moment became the tipping point. Meghan's infamous speech about how excited she was to be at the games because she had been busy with the kids' school drop-off and packing snacks. It was meant to sound relatable. It didn't. Instead, it sparked outrage. Parents online blasted her for using motherhood as a shield while flaunting luxury. One post went viral. "She's packing snacks in Cartier? Give me a break." What made it worse? The perception that she was there for her own brand, not the veterans. Instagram stories appeared within hours of her arrival. Polished, curated, branded. And when she left after just 4 days, citing her children as the reason, many were left wondering why she was suddenly posting Instagram-style updates from hotel rooms, not focused on the games she had just abandoned. For Harry, this was more than just a fashion faux pas. It was a reputational catastrophe. Because for the first time, the Invictus Games weren't being criticized by anti-Sussex tabloids. They were being questioned by supporters. People who had cheered the games since day one now asked, is this about the veterans, or is this about the Meghan Markle show? And behind closed doors, the damage may have been even worse. Sponsors reportedly expressed concern. Government liaisons were said to be uneasy. And even within the Invictus Committee, the sentiment was clear. This isn't what the games were supposed to be. It wasn't about heels, handbags, or paparazzi. It was about honor. And somehow that got lost in translation. But Meghan wasn't the only one pulling focus. Because behind the velvet ropes, there was another silent omission that said more than any outfit ever could. Where was Harry in the merch? And why does his near invisibility speak volumes about a prince trying to disappear? For a man who once described the Invictus Games as his life's passion, Prince Harry's vanishing act during the 2023 games was hard to ignore, and even harder to explain. But it wasn't just his lack of presence on stage, in the press, or even in the daily coverage. It was something far stranger. Something that raised eyebrows from even the most casual observers. Where was Harry in the merch? That's right. In a sea of Invictus-themed hoodies, shirts, mugs, posters, and promotional material, the face of the movement was largely missing. Fans who scrolled through the official online store were puzzled. No fresh Duke-branded gear, no Founder Edition items, no Harry bobbleheads, no collector's edition photos. In fact, some noted that more promotional material featured Meghan, or even generic branding, than Harry himself. For a man whose name and face used to be synonymous with the games, his absence was both conspicuous and revealing. Let's be clear, merch isn't just swag, it's a vital piece of the puzzle. Merchandise brings in money, spreads awareness, and connects fans with the mission. But it also carries something intangible, brand identity. And when your name is Prince Harry, you are the brand. At least you were. So why would the very founder of the games, the man who built Invictus out of the ashes of Afghanistan and the trauma of war, suddenly be missing from its branding? Why scrub the symbol of its origin story right when the games needed an emotional anchor the most? One theory floated behind the scenes is that Harry is being deliberately de-emphasized. Some organizers, wary of the Sussex PR storm cloud, may have wanted to sidestep the media frenzy that inevitably follows him and Meghan. Less Harry means less controversy, or so the thinking goes. But others believe these points point to something far more serious, a quiet retreat, a soft resignation in all but name, a man who, whether due to burnout, conflict, or sheer disinterest, is pulling away from the very project that once saved his public image. And if you zoom out, the signs were already there. During the last Invictus cycle, Harry was far less involved than in previous years. Fewer interviews, shorter speeches, minimal interaction with athletes. One insider described his vibe as checked out, polite but distant. And during this most recent event, he showed up, yes, but only briefly. No gala interviews, no media blitz, no big rallying cry. Just a few reserved appearances, and then gone. Compare this to the early days, when Harry hugged competitors at the finish line, gave emotional speeches, and wiped away tears beside veterans telling their stories. Harry was present. That Harry was invested. But this newer version, he seemed hollowed out, almost like a guest star at his own show. And then there's the money. Some sources close to the Invictus Foundation hinted at a looming concern. Without Harry's personal branding driving engagement and sales, merch revenue has dipped. People used to buy shirts with his face or logo. Now they're just buying neutral logos or skipping the store altogether. It's not about fashion, it's about faith, and people are starting to lose it. In the world of fundraising and nonprofit sustainability, that's a death knell, because when your figurehead fades into the background, so does the urgency to support the cause. One veteran put it bluntly, "The Invictus Games used to be about healing. Now it feels like we're watching something slowly die." And whether it's intentional or accidental, Harry's disappearing act is sending a loud message. A message that says, "This isn't my fight anymore." But if that's true, who is fighting to keep Invictus alive? The answer might disturb you, because cracks are forming behind the scenes. And some of Harry's most trusted allies? They're walking away, resigned, replaced, or simply fed up. Next, the internal unraveling begins. Behind the glossy Instagram posts and curated photo ops, a far more troubling reality has been quietly unfolding within the walls of Prince Harry's once untouchable passion project. Because while the world focused on Meghan's wardrobe and Harry's silence, insiders began to notice something even more alarming. Key people were jumping ship, and fast. It started with a whisper, the sudden departure of a senior figure at one of Harry's main charitable affiliations, reportedly someone instrumental in Invictus operations. Then came another resignation, and another. Not dramatic, not public, but under the surface, a slow bleed of institutional memory, trust, and support. For those paying attention, the pattern was hard to miss. People who had built the project with Harry were walking away from him. Sources say the resignations weren't just over logistics or budgets, they were personal. Frustrations had apparently been brewing for months, perhaps even years. Rumors swirled that Harry had become unreachable, distracted, and less engaged than ever. Zoom meetings were missed. Follow-up emails went unanswered. Decisions were delayed. And when they did come, they were often filtered through layers of PR advisors or communication teams that didn't exist in the early days of Invictus. One insider reportedly summed it up with a single line: "He stopped treating us like teammates and started treating us like props." The emotional fallout ran deep. For many who had joined the cause out of genuine belief in its mission, working with Harry had once been a point of pride. But now, it felt like walking a tightrope over a political minefield. Every move had to be calibrated around press perception, Meghan's involvement, and the ever-shifting moods of a man who, by all appearances, seemed to be drifting further from his own creation. And it wasn't just staff. Several former athletes, once vocal champions of Harry's leadership, began pulling back as well. Some skipped out on planned events, others declined interviews. A few reportedly voiced concerns that the games were becoming more about brand management than veteran support. "It's not about us anymore," one Invictus veteran allegedly told a UK paper. "It's about controlling the message." Behind closed doors, meetings grew tense. Funding gaps were becoming harder to ignore. Corporate partners were reportedly requesting more oversight, more transparency, and in some cases, less Sussex involvement. One charity partner allegedly asked not to have their name featured in joint press releases unless they had final approval. That level of micromanagement only happens when trust is gone. The breaking point may have come when a source close to the games revealed that discussions had begun about contingency plans, strategies for how to keep Invictus running without Prince Harry's active participation. That's no small thing. For years, Harry had been the soul of the movement, but now the organization was quietly preparing for a future where the soul was absent. And perhaps the most brutal irony, this slow-motion collapse was entirely avoidable. Harry didn't need to dominate the spotlight. He didn't need to drown the games in Netflix-style branding. He just needed to show up, be present, do the work. But instead, he vanished behind carefully worded press statements and the occasional Instagram post, leaving the staff, supporters, and veterans to pick up the pieces. And yet, through it all, Meghan Markle insisted. Harry was working every morning at breakfast on Invictus. According to her, it was Invictus, Invictus, Invictus. But if that's true, why are the people closest to the games saying the exact opposite? Next, we dig into Meghan's now infamous defense of her husband, and whether Archie's serial time has become just another scripted talking point. Because the gap between what's said and what's actually done, it is growing wider by the day. When the criticism reached a boiling point, Meghan Markle did what she does best, stepped in to control the narrative. But this time, it wasn't a red carpet interview or a glossy magazine spread. It was a subtle, curated defense, tucked neatly into a public anecdote, seemingly harmless, almost charming, about their son Archie. The line that grabbed headlines? Every morning at breakfast, Archie would ask, "Why is Daddy always on the phone?" Meghan smiled as if to say, "Look, he's so committed, so busy, so passionate about Invictus." She followed up by saying Harry was deep in planning. "Invictus, Invictus, Invictus," she quoted, almost like a mantra. But the public didn't swallow it, not this time. Because the moment that soundbite hit the airwaves, something shifted. The anecdote felt scripted, manufactured, too perfect. And worse, completely at odds with what insiders were saying behind the scenes. If Harry was really working tirelessly on Invictus, why were board members resigning? Why were key donors uneasy? Why were reports surfacing that the games were preparing for his absence? That tiny breakfast story, meant to humanize Harry, instead drew attention to the growing gap between PR and reality. Critics pounced. Social media erupted with disbelief. "Since when does breakfast time prove work ethic?" one tweet read. Another hit harder. "If it's really Invictus, Invictus, Invictus at breakfast, then where the hell is he the rest of the day?" The problem wasn't just the story, it was the context. Meghan's defense came right after another awkward wave of criticism. The designer fashion at the games, her early exit, the lack of transparency around Harry's role. It felt too convenient, as if the couple was scrambling to patch over a growing crack in their brand. And that patch? A child's breakfast routine. Even fans of the couple quietly admitted it felt off. Archie, a child rarely seen or heard from publicly, was now being used as a narrative device, a way to vouch for Harry's dedication without offering receipts. It was emotional deflection disguised as authenticity. And in the high-stakes world of public perception, it backfired. But the real damage was what came next, when media outlets started digging. That same week, multiple British press reports highlighted Harry's dwindling attendance at Invictus planning meetings. Leaked schedules painted a picture of limited involvement, with many of the day-to-day decisions being delegated to staffers or handled by external organizers. In some cases, Harry reportedly didn't even respond to critical planning questions. Suddenly, Archie's breakfast question began to feel like an elaborate cover, not a confession. And while Meghan may have intended to shield her husband from criticism, her comments only fanned the flames. Because in attempting to reframe Harry as the tireless, committed hero, she accidentally reinforced the exact thing critics were already whispering, that their version of reality is no longer aligned with the facts. Worse still, the more Meghan talked, the more Harry seemed to vanish. He didn't back up her anecdote. He didn't share his own side of the story. Instead, silence, carefully curated photos, maybe a press release, but no emotion, no passion, no proof that Invictus, Invictus, Invictus was anything more than a talking point. And the Invictus Games, they don't run on spin. They run on real leadership, real funding, and real commitment. Without that, no anecdote, no matter how charming, can keep the wheels turning. So the question became unavoidable. If Harry's not showing up, and Meghan's only offering bedtime stories, who exactly is left to steer the ship? Because in just a few short years, the Invictus Games will land in Birmingham. And what they want from that event is brutally clear. Not sound bites, not slogans. They want real royals. And that demand might be the final nail in the Sussex brand's charitable coffin. Next, 2027 is looming, and the full royal family is being courted. Will Harry even make the guest list? It was supposed to be his crowning achievement, a legacy event that transcended drama, borders, and royal politics. But as the countdown begins for the 2027 Invictus Games in Birmingham, insiders are sending a message louder than any royal fanfare. This time, it's royals or bust, and Prince Harry may no longer qualify. Yes, you read that right. Organizers of the upcoming games are quietly but urgently courting the very institution Harry walked away from, the firm. Not just for ceremonial appearances, but for legitimacy, for gravitas, for the kind of public confidence and international attention that only full royal participation can guarantee. And the list is telling. King Charles, Queen Camilla, Prince William and Princess Catherine, even Princess Anne and the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. Notice who's missing? The one man who built Invictus from the ground up. The man whose name once opened doors and secured funding with a single handshake. Prince Harry. How did it come to this? It starts with optics. The 2023 Dusseldorf Games left a sour taste in many mouths. Not just because of Meghan's designer parade or Harry's low-energy presence, but because of the glaring disconnect between the Sussexes and the actual veterans the event is meant to uplift. For organizers, this isn't just about image, it's about survival. The Invictus Games need trust, structure, and international collaboration. And increasingly, they're finding more of that in Buckingham Palace than Montecito. According to sources close to the planning committee, UK government contacts and major sponsors have raised concerns about the games being too closely associated with the Sussex brand, particularly after the fallout from Harry and Meghan on Netflix, their Spotify deal collapse, and the media circus surrounding Meghan's failed archetypes come back. One sponsor allegedly pulled back initial interest in 24, citing reputational instability as a risk factor. That term, reputational instability, is now reportedly haunting every funding meeting. Worse still, the cost of living crisis in the UK has made public scrutiny even more intense. With government budgets stretched and charitable giving in decline, asking the British public to rally behind a luxury lifestyle couple living in California is a non-starter. People want royals who show up, put in the work, and don't jet off after 4 days to Instagram their hotel room. They want the real thing, not curated content. That's why all eyes are on William and Catherine. Organizers see them as the crown jewel, stable, beloved, and above scandal. Princess Anne, too, is a military icon in her own right. Even Charles and Camilla, despite their baggage, bring official state-level backing that Harry can no longer provide. One insider reportedly put it bluntly, "We need support that can actually move governments, not just hashtags and documentaries." To make matters worse for Harry, his track record isn't helping. His early exit from previous games, the murky role he plays behind the scenes, the staff resignations, the lukewarm press, even the Netflix coverage failed to reignite passion. Critics said the Sussexes turned veteran stories into background noise for their own redemption arc. For many in the veteran community, that was the final straw. And the Meghan problem? It's not going away. Organizers haven't forgotten her 4-day stint at the last games, capped by an abrupt departure supposedly due to her children. A claim that immediately unraveled as she posted from her hotel suite shortly after. It sent a clear message: publicity first, purpose second. That kind of move doesn't just spark gossip, it poisons trust. So now, with the 2027 games fast approaching, a brutal calculus is underway. Behind closed doors, leadership teams are weighing the optics, the funding, and the potential fallout of inviting Prince Harry and Meghan back as central figures. And for the first time ever, the decision might not be theirs to make. Because if King Charles decides to support the games officially, as sovereign, patron, and father of the future king, then the Invictus Games will belong to the crown again, not to the man who created them. It's a stunning reversal of fate. A prince who walked away from royal life to build something of his own, now being edged out of his own creation by the very family he tried to escape. But what happens if the royals say yes and Harry gets sidelined? The answer is chilling, because it would mean more than just a PR loss. It would mean Harry has been officially replaced by the institution he once defied. And Invictus would survive without him. Up next, the money trail. Because all the royal star power in the world won't help if the cash dries up. And that's exactly what's starting to happen. The funding crisis is here, and the Sussexes may be the reason the phones have stopped ringing. If there's one truth the Sussexes can't PR spin into oblivion, it's this: no cause, no matter how noble, survives without funding. And for the Invictus Games, that uncomfortable reality is crashing down hard. Because behind the sleek branding, emotional testimonials, and royal nostalgia lies a brutal fact: the money is running out, and donors, they're quietly vanishing. What began as a visionary project rooted in Prince Harry's own military experience has now become a financial tightrope act, one that fewer and fewer investors are willing to walk. According to insiders close to the 2027 Birmingham Planning Committee, backing for the games is at an all-time low, with multiple high-profile sponsors either pulling out entirely or freezing their pledges until clarity around Sussex involvement is resolved. In plainer terms, they want royals, not drama. It's not hard to see why. The 2023 Games left a trail of financial red flags. While attendance numbers remained steady and the athletes delivered unforgettable performances, the optics surrounding Harry and Meghan spooked major donors. The lavish fashion, the early exits, the focus on curated Sussex moments over veteran stories. One potential backer was quoted as saying, "If I'm writing a 6-figure check, I want to know it's going to veterans, not Meghan's next photo op." That kind of skepticism isn't petty, it's foundational. Charity is built on trust, and when the face of your organization is perceived as self-interested, distracted, or worse, using the event to rehab a Hollywood brand, donations dry up fast. But it's not just individual donors. Governmental support is also under threat. With the UK grappling with a historic cost of living crisis, politicians are facing intense scrutiny over every penny spent. And asking taxpayers to fund an event tied to a prince who abandoned his duties and now lives in a California mansion? That's political suicide. Behind the scenes, several MPs are reportedly pressuring the games to realign with the crown fully, or risk losing what little public money remains. And the timing couldn't be worse. Hosting the games in Birmingham is already a logistical and financial challenge. Security costs, venue rentals, international transport for athletes, medical support, accommodations, all of it adds up. And with inflation squeezing budgets tighter than ever, the margin for error is razor thin. In a perfect world, Harry would be stepping in to fill the gap, leveraging his celebrity, forging corporate partnerships, and reigniting global enthusiasm. But that's not happening, not even close. His visibility has plummeted. His speeches are generic. His interviews are rare. Even the merchandise, as we've seen, is uninspired and underperforming. And Meghan? Her business ventures, jam jars, Instagram revivals, ambiguous lifestyle brands, have done little to stabilize the Sussex empire. If anything, they've added more noise to an already cluttered narrative. For potential donors, this lack of focus is a red flag. One former sponsor put it plainly, "When your founders are more famous than the cause is in trouble." And so the 2027 Invictus Games now face an existential question. How do you raise millions of pounds when your poster boy is disappearing and your brand is toxic to half the public? Some behind the scenes are already strategizing, developing contingency plans that minimize Sussex's involvement entirely, quietly reaching out to the palace, rewriting press releases to emphasize royal patronage without naming names. One source even claimed that planning teams are preparing 2 versions of the event blueprint, one with Harry and one without. It's a humiliating turn of events for the man who once stood as the soul of Invictus. But when the checks stop coming, loyalty fades fast. Because donors don't fund scandals, they fund certainty. And right now, the only certainty surrounding the Sussexes is uncertainty itself. Coming up next, when even the money pulls away, the only thing left is image. But what does that image look like when the prince no longer has a role? Is Harry becoming a man with no mission and no identity? The next chapter is darker than anyone expected. Strip away the pomp, the palace, and the Netflix cameras, and you're left with one uncomfortable question. What does Prince Harry actually do anymore? It's a question that used to have a simple answer. For years, Harry's life was defined by Invictus, a passion project born from his own scars in Afghanistan, polished into a global symbol of resilience. When critics attacked, he pointed to the games. When tabloids mocked, he pointed to the veterans. It was his shield, his purpose, his proof that walking away from the monarchy wasn't a mistake. But now that the shield is cracked, the veterans are restless, and the games are drifting back into royal hands. Without Invictus, Harry looks exposed, vulnerable, even irrelevant. Let's be honest, what's left of the Sussex brand? The Spotify deal collapsed in public humiliation, with executives mocking Meghan as a grifters. The Netflix documentaries, while buzzy at first, quickly devolved into background noise, overshadowed by their constant contradictions. Meghan's lifestyle ventures, jam jars, Instagram teases, and vanity projects feel more like parody than enterprise. And Harry? Aside from ghost-written memoirs and awkward press appearances, his role has shrunk to little more than a supporting actor in his own life. Think about it. When Meghan speaks, it's global headlines. When she launches a project, it's debated endlessly. But when Harry appears, it's usually in reaction, in defense, in the margins of her spotlight. Once, he was the rebel prince, the wild card of the monarchy, the soldier who fought on the front lines. Now, he's the man sitting silently in the background, while Meghan explains why their kids eat organic snacks. Even his memoir, Spare, which briefly reignited sympathy, has now become a punchline. Too many contradictions, too many digs at his family that aged badly in hindsight, too many stories that felt less like confession and more like calculated outrage. Instead of carving out independence, Harry's tell-all chained him even tighter to the very monarchy he tried to escape. Because without the royals, the father he criticizes, the brother he resents, the sister-in-law he allegedly envies, Harry has no storyline. And that's the problem. Every celebrity, every public figure, every leader needs a mission, a cause, a reason for people to keep watching. Meghan, for better or worse, has carved one out. The relentless pursuit of reinvention. Love her or hate her, she's always doing something. But Harry? His calendar is sparse. His speeches were uninspired. His appearances are becoming fewer and fewer. Which leaves the world asking, what is he for? For veterans, this is the most painful twist of all. Harry once embodied the Invictus spirit. He was raw, passionate, and visibly connected to the men and women whose lives mirrored his own. But the further he drifts into California luxury, the more alien he becomes from that world. When donors see him now, they don't see a soldier. They see a man sipping lattes in Montecito, cashing streaming checks, and struggling to remember why he matters. And the cruelest part? The image battle isn't just about the public. It's about the royals too. For every photo of William shaking hands at a hospital, for every speech by Catherine championing mental health, for every subtle gesture by King Charles reinforcing duty, Harry looks smaller, more detached, more like an exile without a cause. If Invictus slips away completely, he won't just lose a project, he'll lose the only piece of moral high ground he still has. So what does Harry do now? He can't go back to the army. He can't reclaim his role in the monarchy. He can't survive on book royalties and podcast fantasies forever. Without a mission, he risks becoming what critics already whisper, a man defined only by Meghan's next move. And if that's true, then Harry is no longer the hero of his own story. He's the footnote, the sidekick, the brand extension, which makes the final question unavoidable and devastating. If Harry has nothing left to fight for, what's left of Harry at all? And that brings us to the last chapter. Because when all else fails, when the projects collapse, the donors retreat, and the image fades, there's only one card left to play: the children. Archie, Lilibet, the ultimate bargaining chips for one final Netflix deal. But is that bet too dangerous to make? There's a coldness creeping in around Prince Harry now. Not the kind you feel in a palace hallway or on the other end of a strained phone call with Buckingham Palace. No, this chill is different. It's colder, quieter, and far more permanent. Because what we're witnessing isn't just a bad season or a public stumble, it's the slow, surgical freeze-out of a man who once believed he could rewrite the rules of royalty and win. But the game has changed, and Harry, he's not holding the cards anymore. Invictus was his last safe haven, the one place where politics didn't matter, where the press had to shut up and let the mission speak. But now even that's fading. Quiet resignations, dried up funding, veterans feeling sidelined, donors pulling back. All while Meghan turns up for 4 days, drops designer labels like confetti, and exits stage left. The damage is real. The consequences are permanent. And with 2027 looming, the writing is on the wall. They want real royals, not exiles, not influencers, not luxury rebrands masquerading as charity. Birmingham isn't some Hollywood backdrop. It's the UK, it's home turf, and the crown is circling back. If Charles, William, or Anne show up, and all signs point to them doing just that, Harry becomes a guest at his own creation. Or worse, not invited at all. That's the freeze-out. Not a tabloid headline, not a rumor. A visible restructuring of who matters and who doesn't in the public eye, in charity circles, and inside the very institutions Harry once thought he could outmaneuver. And the most tragic part, he seems to know it. Gone are the passionate speeches, the hands-on leadership, the fire in his eyes when veterans spoke. In their place, carefully staged statements, secondhand anecdotes, and silence. Meghan's now the mouthpiece, the movement, the machine. Harry is just there. Still a prince by name, but stripped of every function that made that title meaningful. So what's next? When the charitable work dries up, when the palace door stays shut, and the cameras turn away, what's left? The answer, sadly, may already be in motion. Because when brands run out of narratives, they pivot to legacy. They focus on the next generation. And that's the final Sussex play. Archie and Lilibet, the innocent faces of a fading brand, now polished, protected, and positioned for one last cash grab. Whether it's a Netflix docuseries, a children's book line, or another behind-the-scenes motherhood podcast, the pivot is coming. The timing is too perfect. The pressure is too real. But here's the danger. Once you place your children at the center of your business, there's no going back. Every moment becomes curated. Every smile is packaged. And every critic, every donor, every potential ally will start asking, are they building a family or a franchise? It's the ultimate gamble, one that could restore their relevance or shatter what little public trust remains. And as the clock ticks toward 2027, the world isn't just watching Harry's next move. They're watching who's still standing with him. Because right now, the silence from Buckingham Palace is deafening. William has nothing to say. Charles has nothing to offer. Anne isn't returning his calls. And Meghan? She's building empires, dropping jars of jam, and prepping her next PR reinvention. Meanwhile, the man who once stood before thousands of wounded warriors and promised he'd never leave them behind, he is slowly being left behind himself. The royal freeze-out isn't coming, it's here. And Prince Harry, the soldier, the son, the founder, is standing on the wrong side of the door, alone, out of moves, and out of time.